had just set the new keys on the hook of my lakeside cottage when my daughter-in-law's voice cracked through the phone. "We'll be there in 2 hours, with 30 people." The line went dead, and all I could hear was the soft lap of Lake Michigan against the dock and the hum of a distant outboard. Fresh paint and lemon cleaner hung in the air. My coffee left a trembling ring on the counter, and I realized my hands were still speckled with white from touching up trim. At 66, I'm Margaret, and I thought I'd finally bought myself some quiet. Instead, my stomach dropped at the sting of being told, not asked, what would happen in my own home. 2 hours later, gravel crunched like breaking bones under a convoy of SUVs and a lifted pickup, tailgates thudding open. Coolers, red Solo cups, inflatable flamingos, folding tables, an instant block party spilled onto my brand new cedar deck. Sunscreen and charcoal smoke, mixed with lake breeze, as a Bluetooth speaker blared country hits. A screen door I'd never heard slam before snapped like a slap. Brianna swept in without knocking, sunglasses on her head, smile bright and sharp. "Surprise. We thought you'd want to celebrate the new place." My son trailed behind with a helpless shrug, and wet footprints already mapped my refinished floors. I tried to speak. HOA limits, septic capacity, the still tacky varnish on my grandmother's maple table. But someone parked a sizzling crock-pot right on it and left a dark ring. A lab shook lake water all over my throw pillows. A cousin dragged a grill across the deck, scraping cedar like nails on a chalkboard. "Relax, Mom, it's just a cottage," Brianna said, rolling her eyes, and a few people chuckled as if I were the punchline. Heat climbed my neck, wind chimes clattered, and thunderheads stacked over the water as if the sky agreed with me. When I finally raised my voice, the speaker paused, heads turned, and I felt like a trespasser fighting for my own front door. I'll tell you how it got to this, how a housewarming turned into a siege, the tiny boundaries I let slide, and the one hard line I drew that night that changed our family forever. If you've ever had your no steamrolled by the people you love, subscribe to follow stories like mine, and to see how I took my keys back. It didn't start that afternoon with the speaker going quiet and 30 faces turning to me like I was an interruption. It started years earlier, with the small ways I said yes when I meant not today, with the way love made me soften edges that should have stayed firm. My name is Margaret, never Marge, no matter how many times people try to lop off the rest. And at 66, I know the difference between being generous and being erased. Brianna has never learned that difference. She is my daughter-in-law, bright as a storefront window and twice as reflective. She shows you what she wants you to see, and somehow your own outline vanishes inside hers. She calls herself practical. What she calls practical has a way of landing on my doorstep with no warning and a smile that suggests I should be grateful. I bought the cottage on Lake Michigan for the quiet. That's what I told the realtor when we stood on the dock the first day I walked out here alone. There was a loon calling then, the kind of low, hollow sound that gets into your bones. A lily pad tilted under the weight of a frog. Pine needles smelled warm and sweet in the sun. I loved my little ranch in Grand Rapids well enough, but every summer since I was a girl, my parents rented a shack up near Ludington, an ugly little place with brown shag carpet and a leaky faucet that could turn me into the happiest child on earth. My father would sit with me on the dock and show me how the water changed color with the clouds. "It tells you a storm before your bones do," he said. He had a way of turning everything into a lesson I felt lucky to receive. That lace of memories is what I saved for, penny after penny, for years. I taught 4th grade for most of my life, and then finished up as a librarian at the school when my knees got too tired for the day-long parade to the pencil sharpener. When my husband David got sick, I worked nights at a grocery store to stay afloat, stocking the end caps at Meijer under fluorescent lights so bright they made a quiet hum in my ears. I rolled coins at the kitchen table, sold my mother's china at a church rummage sale, and when my son needed braces, I traded in my car and drove an old sedan that rattled in the cold. After David passed, those dollars went to tuition. He'd always wanted our boy to have what we didn't, and then to a down payment on a little house for my son and his new wife when they got married young and broke. I made casseroles and pans with my name taped to the bottom and cleaned places I didn't live in and smiled through holidays I hosted in a house that wasn't my own. I told myself I was building something I could one day rest inside. The cottage was my rest. The first morning after I closed, I woke up on the little daybed by the window because my mattress delivery was still 2 days away. The room smelled like lemon cleaner and pine. The blue painter's tape still stuck along one floorboard where I'd missed it the night before. The water made its gentle hush-hush out beyond the dock. I brewed coffee in a new pot that burbled like a small brook. I ran my hand along the maple table I'd inherited from my grandmother, the one I rubbed with oil every spring until it glowed like a honeycomb. I took out the binder the HOA president had given me with a polite smile and a stack of rules. Pine Dune Lakeside Association, established 1978, and drew little stars next to septic capacity in quiet hours and no glass on the beach. I was the sort of neighbor who showed up to meetings with notes and cookies. Peace, in my mind, had structure. It wasn't an emptiness. It was a pattern. "Mom, are you sure you don't want help?" My son had asked when I told him I was moving the boxes myself. His name is Jason. He was a sweet-mouthed boy who cried when he smashed a June bug by accident. He grew into a man who carries other people's things, even if it hurts his knees. A good son. He married Brianna when he was 26, and dizzy with not wanting to disappoint anyone ever again. He told me he needed someone else's certainty for a while. He chose a woman who could turn a plan into a calendar share before you finished making your case. The first time I met her, she arrived at my house in a crisp white shirt, sunglasses in her hair, and a smile that sparkled like a wrapped package. She brought cupcakes from a place everyone in Easttown raved about and said, "I'm the fun one," like it was a warning. When she called me Marge, 5 minutes into our conversation, I corrected her gently. She laughed. "Margaret it is," and it was. Until it wasn't. At the baby shower for their first child, Brianna marched into my kitchen with a clipboard and moved my knives to a different drawer. "This makes more sense," she chirped. At Thanksgiving, she announced we were doing a plant-based menu that year for the planet, then handed me a grocery list and the times she'd be available to pick things up. When my grandson started preschool, she put me on a rotating schedule of pickups and drop-offs and sent me a color-coded grid to make sure I didn't forget. None of these things were terrible on their own. They were the small, tidy ways of a woman who doesn't like to ask if it means she might hear no. When she told me they were coming up to my new lake place, she didn't say who, and I didn't ask. The line clicked dead, and the hum of space around me felt suddenly like the inside of a seashell. I set the keys on the hook I'd screwed into the wall that morning and ran my hand over my hair without meaning to. My coffee left a ring on the counter when my hand trembled. White paint flecked my knuckles like powder. I watched a pontoon float by at the far edge of the cove, slow as a nap. I gave myself exactly 5 minutes to be afraid, and then started moving food off that maple table and onto the island, laying down trivets and a clean tablecloth just in case. I collected my little throw pillows and tucked them into a closet so the lab their friends always brought wouldn't mistake them for chew toys. I covered the seat of the wicker chair with an old towel. I set the HOA binder on the counter within reach like a talisman. They arrived the way Brianna always arrives, like she's the center of a parade that doesn't need a permit. I heard the grind of tires on gravel, too many doors, too much laughter. These were not people arriving at a home. These were people arriving at an event. They brought folding tables and a beanbag toss game and an inflatable flamingo so big it could hold 3 adults and a cooler. They brought coolers full of beer and hard seltzer and juice pouches. They brought a Bluetooth speaker that looked like a small suitcase and a portable fire pit I knew we weren't supposed to use on windy days. The screen door slapped as if it had hands. One of Brianna's friends set a sizzling crock pot, damp with steam, down right on my grandmother's tablecloth, the heat bleeding through like a bruise, and when I moved it to a trivet, she laughed. "Oh, you're the careful one." "Surprise," Brianna said, her sunglasses pushed up on her head like a crown. She smelled like expensive sunscreen. She kissed both my cheeks as if I had been away and missed her. "New house, new traditions," she said, and my son stood behind her with his hands open at his sides, helpless and apologetic, and still a good boy under it all. "We have HOA limits," I started. my voice steady, because I practice steadiness the way some people practice piano. And the septic. It's a cottage, Margaret, she said, rolling her eyes just enough to sting. Relax. This is what it's for. Memories. She did a little spin, arms out wide, as if to show me what memories look like. And I thought of my father's quiet hands teaching me knots, and felt my own memory shrink in the glare. What's the head count? I asked, already knowing. 30, she said, pulling a bag of hamburger buns out of somebody's arms and setting them on my clean counter. We tried to keep it small. I posted a save the date this morning on my story so people wouldn't feel left out. The septic holds 15, I said. That's what the binder says, and the HOA has quiet hours at 10, and no glass on the beach. Got it, she said, waving a hand. You're so cute. She meant it like a pat on the head, like a well-behaved dog. She handed me a plastic tub of potato salad, the dill kind people in the neighborhood deli make too sweet, and kissed my cheek again. Put this somewhere? We don't have space in the coolers. There are things you remember clearly because they culminate in a mess, and things you remember because they are the beginning of one. I remember the lab skittering on my new floors, laughter popping like corn, someone dragging a grill across the deck and leaving white scratches in the cedar that made me draw in my breath. I remember watching a nephew I didn't know jump off the end of the dock without a life vest, his shoulders bright with sun, his feet careless where they might land. I remember the smell of charcoal mixing with pine and lake and lemon cleaner. I remember Brianna shouting, "Music!" and someone propped the speaker on the counter like an altar. I remember the way my son's shoulders rose and fell as he carried things, trying to help, and never sure how. "Who wants burgers?" someone shouted. A chorus of yes. Red Solo cups were scrawled with names, and a stack of paper plates disappeared under chips. Brianna flitted from group to group like a hostess queen bee, collecting compliments for food she hadn't cooked, and a house she hadn't paid for. "We love your vibe," a friend said to her, meaning mine, and Brianna smiled and said, "Right, it needed some life." I thought of the nights I had worked at Meijer, cutting coupons during my 15-minute break, my feet aching and sore, thinking about a little place where the only sound at night would be crickets and the occasional screen door somewhere down the beach. I thought of the years I had turned down trips with friends because somebody needed me here, my mother with her swollen knees, my husband with his tired lungs, my son with a science fair board sagging under glue. Sacrifice isn't always grand. Sometimes it's 15 minutes you wanted to sit in your car with the radio off and you didn't. Sometimes it's standing at a sink, washing cake pans for a party you didn't plan. The lines in your fingers whitening and then turning red again under hot water. I thought about those red, soft hands, and looked down at my knuckles dusted with fresh paint and felt a peculiar heat of protectiveness sweep through me. This was my chance to make a place that didn't ask me to solve its emergencies or absorb its noise. This was my soft place. "Brianna," I said, moving in close so only she would hear. "Shoes off inside, please, the floors." She looked down at her white sneakers and then at me. "I'm not walking on eggshells, Margaret," she said, the friendly roundness gone from her voice. "This isn't a museum. It's for our family. For everyone." She smiled again, hosting face back in place. "Don't worry. I'll Venmo you for anything." That hour stuck like a fishbone in my throat. Our family is a phrase I believe in. It should never be used like a crowbar. The first time Brianna ever came to my house, she pointed to a shadow box of my father's fishing lures, hanging by the back door, and said, "So nostalgic," with a voice that turned it into a museum. Later, I found the shadow box in the basement wrapped in a towel, and when I asked her, she said it hadn't gone with the new paint color we picked for my haul. "Mom, it's fine," Jason said now, reading my face like he used to when he was little, and wanted to stop a fight between the neighborhood kids over the kickball rules. "It's just one afternoon." "One afternoon," I repeated, and looked out at the water where sunlight inched across waves like someone was throwing coins. The day had a heaviness to it. Storm clouds stacking one on top of the other on the horizon the way they do on the lake when weather turns like a page. I tried to do what I have done so many times when Brianna's current swept around me. I tried to be the backwater, the quiet eddy where things settle. I took the glass bottles off the beach and lined them on the counter and said, "Outside plastic only, please," with a small smile. I laid towels over the back of chairs to catch wet skin. I opened every window and turned on the ceiling fans so charcoal smells wouldn't sit too long in the curtains. I asked the nephew who had almost landed on a submerged rock to use a life vest, and when he rolled his eyes, I went inside and got one myself and buckled it around him gently like he was still a toddler and not a teenage boy with new muscles and old manners. He looked embarrassed. I didn't care. I thought of the early days with Jason when we lived in a simple rental near the railroad tracks. I packed his lunches in little wax paper bags and drew small faces on his banana with a pen. I bought him a red backpack and sewed the seam 3 times when it started to fray because we couldn't afford a new one. I took him to the lake on Sunday afternoons when I could scrounge gas and we'd throw breadcrumbs to gulls and watch the waves slap the rocks. I promised him a boat once in a foolish fit of optimism after he saw a pontoon glide by with children waving from the bow. He remembered that promise until he was 13, and then he forgot, because teenagers have to forget the promises that might hurt them when they don't come true. I did not forget. I thought of that boat when I looked at the inflatable flamingo, purchased for laughter and a photo. Soon the pink bulb drifted loose of its ropes and knocked against my dock, leaving a scuff of dark rubber that would need scrubbing. Laughter. A girl in a straw hat snapped photos and said, "This is such a find," as if she were in a store. It is a particular kind of unkindness when someone makes you feel foolish for caring. When Brianna said, "It's just a cottage," she was saying more than that. I heard, "It's not real." I heard, "Your dream is small and so it is silly." I heard, too, all the times I had said, "Sure, we can host it here," or "Yes, I'll drive," instead of letting silence answer. I had allowed this. That's the admission that stings the most. A neighbor, Lois from Lot 12, walked up the driveway then, her mouth a line that could be friendly or not depending on the day. She and I had exchanged numbers when I moved in, neighborly caution. She wore capri pants and a visor, and a look I recognized from every PTA meeting ever held. "Margaret," she said, eyes on the crowd. "Hi there." "Lois," I said, my voice cheerful and, I hope, apologetic. "We're celebrating." "I see that," she said. The speaker pumped out a country song with a lyric about tailgates and forever love, and the lake being the only church a man needs. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was loud. "Just a reminder, dear, the association asks that large gatherings get registered through the website." Dear, another pat on the head. We were all so good at them. "Of course," I said. Brianna, my daughter-in-law, thought of this last minute. Lois's eyes flicked to Brianna, tall and animated in the center of a group, and then back to me. "We do also try to keep, well, you know." She looked at the glass bottles on the counter as if they might leap to the sand on their own. "Plastic only on the beach." "I know," I said. She nodded, relieved, and walked away with a small smile that said, "I have said my piece. I wanted to love Brianna. This is a thing I need you to know. I wanted to love the woman who loved my son. When she had their first baby, I was there, holding her hand while contractions moved through her, rubbing her back in small circles like I used to do for Jason when his stomach hurt. Afterward, in that dim hospital room, she cried and said, "I'm not going to be good at this," and I said, "No one is at first, but you will be. You have a kind heart." She cried into my shoulder. I remember that day when she calls me cute and tells me not to fuss. It helps, but it does not make this afternoon easier. Later, when the grill smoked and someone shouted for more ice and I realized my freezer was empty, I took my keys from the hook and drove to the gas station down the road. In the car, with the radio off, my breath evened out. The lake went gray under the building clouds. The little store had a handwritten sign about bait and a rack of plastic toys nobody buys unless they've forgotten their children and are too guilty not to buy something for them now. I bought 2 bags of ice and a package of popsicles because a little boy had stood in front of the freezer staring as if it held a winter he could eat. The cashier said, "Busy up at your place?" And I smiled. "Just family," I said. Driving back, I thought about how many times I had been the backup plan, the person who leaves her own party to fetch more napkins, and I felt something in me settle. Not a resignation. Something firmer. A plank going down in a bridge. When I came back, I found the maple table ringed in a dark circle from the hot crock pot someone had set back on it after I moved it. It was like a quiet bruise blooming, and I pressed my finger to it, as if I could erase it with my skin. Brianna saw me and tilted her head. "We'll fix it," she said, her voice light. "There's a product for everything." She did not touch the mark. She had reorganized my kitchen while I was gone. The plates were moved to a lower shelf and the glasses to a higher one. A drawer of dish towels had been transformed into a drawer of grilling tools. "Flow," she said, when I opened a cabinet looking for a bowl and found cutting boards. "This way makes more sense." "For whom?" I asked. I didn't mean it to come out sharp, but it did. She blinked. "For us," she said, as if the answer were obvious. Us. That little word can be such a grace. It can also be a theft. My house had become a stage. She was building her story on it. At some point, she had started calling my dream her content. "Look," she said now, touching my arm. "I want you to be happy. It's so gorgeous what you did here. Those chairs, and the blue throws, it's also you. I just think it needs, a little energy." She snapped her fingers. "My family always did this. Houses are for people." "My family had rules," I said. "We have rules," she said, laughing. "They're kind of silly things, like, first one to the house gets to pick a bedroom, and no one gets to save seats, and the kitchen belongs to the people who are cooking at that moment. See? Easy." "I am the one who always cooks," I said. She took a step back and looked at me as if she had misheard. "You can sit today," she said, magnanimous. "I've got it." And then she was off again, delegating, collecting, smiling, turning. When a sliver of thunder rolled over the lake, the sound long and low, a quiet moved across the deck like someone smoothing a sheet. People glanced at the sky and then at Brianna, waiting for her call. "We're fine," she announced. "It'll blow over." She was always sure of the weather, of the rules, of where other people's things belonged. She snapped a selfie by the water with her arm long, and the sunset caught just right. Later, I would see that she wrote, "New house for the fam. Can't wait for all the weekends up here." I would write nothing underneath it. I would watch the little hearts gather like a field of poppies, beautiful and poisonous if you let yourself lie in them. My son found me inside, moving the shadow box of lures from the closet back to the wall next to the door. He hesitated, then helped me straighten it so it hung just so. "Hey," he said. "I love you." "I know," I said. "And I love you." He leaned his head on my shoulder for a second, the way he used to when he was 10, and a growth spurt had made his limbs foreign to him. "She gets excited," he said. "She gets careless," I said. He nodded. "Sometimes she fills up a room before she remembers anyone else is in it." "Rooms have doors," I said, "and houses have keys." He looked at me then, eyes soft. "Are we okay?" "We will be," I said, "because I am about to do something I should have done a long time ago." He didn't ask me what. He didn't need to. He kissed my cheek and squeezed my hand and went back out to the deck to carry plates and get someone a drink and apologize for the weather, as if it were ours to control. When the rain finally came, it came the way it so often does by the lake. Sudden, solid, and honest. The kind of rain that gets big and purposeful, as if it means to clean everything. People shrieked and gathered up towels and ducked under the eaves. The speaker hissed and died. The silence it left was a blessing. You could hear the lake again, working itself. In that quiet, with the room full of damp, laughing strangers, I felt the edges of myself again. The window panes chattered lightly in the wind. Somewhere, a screen door eased shut instead of slamming. A small mercy. "Okay," Brianna shouted over the soft drum of drops. "Inside party." She clapped her hands. "Everyone grab your stuff. It's snug but cozy." "No," I said, my voice not loud but not small. It landed in the room like a pebble in a bowl of water. The ripple went out. Heads turned. Not in anger or confusion, just in pause. It is a strange power, the honest no. People stop because it doesn't arrive often. Brianna turned to me. Smile still fixed, but eyes sharpening. What's that? There's septic, I said. There are rules. And this house is... I put my hand over my chest because I didn't have the words for the rest. It's mine, yes, but more than that. It's the place I promised that tired younger woman I'd have someday. It's my father's voice on a dock. It's oil rubbed into maple. It's coupons saved and casseroles baked, and 1,000 little me's who kept saying yes. It's just rain, Margaret, she said. We'll towel off. Everyone not immediate family needs to head out, I said. I spoke as if I were declining dessert. Kind, firm. The road's still good. It hasn't gotten muddy yet. You'll get home fine. It's been lovely. Thank you for coming. I smiled. My voice didn't beg. That was important to me. A murmur went through the room. Someone said, "It's early." A girl in a straw hat said, "We brought stuff." The lab wagged, confused by all the standing. "Margaret," Brianna said, and this time she didn't bother with a smile. "Don't do this." "I am not doing anything," I said. "I am stopping doing the things I do not want to do." It is amazing how quick a party can pack when the weather changes and the owner of the house has her hand on the light switch. People are used to being told what to do at gatherings even if they don't know it. Once it was clear this evening would be different from what they expected, everyone moved easily enough. They folded chairs and slid coolers toward the door. I held out a stack of takeout containers I keep for church suppers and said, "Please take your leftovers." A man with a beard too tidy to be unintentional said, "You sure?" And I nodded. "I'm sure." Brianna watched them, eyes tight, arms crossed. My son walked over to her with his hands open. "Let's just go," he whispered, touching her elbow. "We can come back tomorrow. We'll talk." "We," she said, looking at me. "We'll talk." Her emphasis was clear. "We, not you." "We will," I said. "Of course." As the last friend waved and the big truck with the grill pulled away, the rain softened to a tap. The yard looked like a muddy fairground. The flamingo lay on its side on the dock, a deflated peony. The mountains of dishes were not insurmountable, because I have had years of practice. I washed without thinking, warm water sliding over plastic cups and plates and tongs, and found my breath in the rhythm. My son carried out the trash to the garage and came back for more. Brianna walked the perimeter of the living room as if it were a courtroom, and she were a lawyer preparing for trial, touching the edge of the sofa, the surface of the bookshelf, an old photo of my parents on the mantel that I had put out just that morning, because I liked the way my mother's dress looked in this light. "You made me look foolish," she said finally, not loudly, but with the quiver of an arrow. "In front of my friends, in front of my husband, in front of my children. You made me feel invisible," I said. "In my house, in my life." She blinked. Rain ticked. My son was a shadow in the hall, hovering. "You always do this," she said. "You hold things in, and then you... crack." She made a motion with her hands, opening them like a magician finishing a trick. "You could have told me earlier. You could have asked nicely." "I did," I said. "I did. Often. Quietly." I said smaller. "Shoes off. Not the table. Register the party. No glass on the beach." I said please. I said nothing. I said something. I put the sponge down and dried my hands on a towel the way my mother used to, smoothing the ends, folding them. "It's my job to be clear," I said, "and your job to listen. Today I was clear." "So this is how it's going to be?" she asked, her chin lifting an inch. "You're going to gatekeep a place that we, our family, could make so many memories in? You think your peace matters more than joy?" She should have been a good lawyer, I thought. She is quick with words. But my peace is my joy, and the line between them is the one I drew with my key on that hook. My little border. "This cottage is my home," I said. "Your family is welcome. When I say yes. When we plan together. When you ask." She put her hands on her hips and laughed once, not kindly. You think you can keep us away? We'll get the key from Jason. We'll come when you're not here. We'll take care of things. You don't have to be so precious. My son stepped into the door then, his face a mix of grief and resolve. No, he said. Bree, we won't. He looked at me. I won't. For a second she looked at him, surprised, as if someone had moved a chair she had been sure would be under her when she sat. You're choosing her? She asked. I am choosing to be decent, he said, voice soft. To my mother, and to you. We can have both if we listen. I pulled the key hook off the wall and followed my own impulse. I removed the gold key that said main house and the silver one that said garage and put them in my pocket. I left the one marked dock on the hook. If you come with the kids, I said, for a day, when I am here, I will give you the dock key so you can paddleboard and fish and make a mess outside, and we will eat sandwiches on the picnic table and squint together in the sun. And I will be so happy. But not like today. Not without care. You're making a boundary, she said, as if she had discovered the right word in a word search. Her smile flattened. New rules. No, I said. Old rules. Mine. I just haven't said them out loud like this for a while. We'll see about that, she said, and then softened, because she is not without grace. I'm sorry about the table, she added, glancing at the dark ring, which was now a soft halo in the dimming light. I didn't think. I know, I said. That's the problem. That night, after they drove away, Brianna stiff in the passenger seat, my son's hands tight on the wheel, the taillights pinching red in the rain, I sat at the maple table with a soft cloth and oil and worked on the mark. You can lift some stains if you work at them gently and long enough. Some you learn to live with. The sound of the rain turned into the small patter of water slipping from leaves. The lake went almost black under the hunched sky. I could hear a buoy clinking somewhere far out like a quiet bell. I thought about my life in a series of little rooms. The apartment with the radiator that clicked in winter and made a sound like my grandmother's ticking clock. The house near the tracks with the windows that rattled in a good wind. The place I bought with the insurance money where my son learned to mow the lawn in crooked lines. I thought about all the times people had come in and moved my things, and how most of the time I had let them because it seemed easier, because I loved them, because I was tired, because the world asks women like me to be porous, to absorb and cushion and hold. I thought about my father teaching me to tie a strong knot. 2 loops, he had said, guiding my fingers. 1 to hold, 1 to release. In the night, when the power flickered off and then on again, when the refrigerator hummed back to life and the clock on the stove blinked at me, I took a piece of paper and wrote down what I would do in the morning. Not a battle plan. A promise to myself. Call the HOA and ask for the signs they give out about gatherings. Write up a little note for the fridge. Shoes off inside. Plastic on the beach. No glass. Ask before you move something that belongs to someone else. Put the shadow box of lures higher. Not because of Brianna, but because it made me feel better to see it when I walked in the door. Put a welcome basket by the front door with sunscreen and towels and a card that said, "We are so happy to have you. Just check with me first, so we can all enjoy this place together. Change the code on the garage door. Buy more life vests." I went to bed in my little room with the smell of lemon oil in my nose and the ache of the day in my shoulders. I lay on my side and thought of my son's face in the kitchen, how he had tilted toward kindness. I thought of Brianna in the rain, beautiful and furious, and young enough still to think anyone who says no is trying to steal her future. I did not feel cruel. I felt awake. In the morning, the lake was a sheet of pewter under a sky the color of dishwater, and that was beautiful too. A gull stood on the end of the dock and looked like a child drawing of a bird. White, simple, clean. I made coffee. I opened the screen door gently and stepped out onto my deck. The scratches from the grill looked less sharp in the gray light. The flamingo lay folded like a sleeping thing. I picked it up and leaned it against the rail, its big silly face peeking around. I could let it lie there until Sunday when the kids came back. They would laugh. I could laugh too. I sat in the wicker chair I had covered yesterday with a towel, and this morning let it be naked to the air again. The world smelled like pine and rain and the faintest trace of charcoal. A pontoon hummed past, its engine a barely there murmur. In the distance, the clouds were lifting. There are stories we tell ourselves to excuse the days we don't take care of our hearts. Mine was that love means letting people be who they are without interruption. But my father had another lesson for tying knots. You tie it so it holds, he said, or else the boat runs away. Brianna is not a villain in my story. She is a woman who needs to learn that other people's homes are not props. I am not a victim. I am a woman who has spent a lifetime making sure other people were comfortable and has finally asked that they make her comfortable too. The key in my pocket was not a weapon. It was a tool. It would open doors and close them. It would keep some things in and some things out. It would make a sound when I hung it up at the end of a long day. The small click of a boundary respected. When my phone buzzed just after 9, it was a text from my son. Just 3 words. I'm proud, Mom. Then another, separate from Brianna. Can we talk later? I typed back to both. Yes, I said. I poured another cup of coffee and watched a sailboat in the distance catch a light wind, white against the soft gray, and begin to move. In the morning, the light broke thin and pewter over the lake, and I could see where the wind had laid down the waves in neat rows, as if a big hand had been smoothing a wrinkled sheet. The scratches on the deck were still there, sure, but 1 or 2 had softened already in the damp. That gave me courage. Small wounds can soften if you tend them. Jason's text was first. 3 words that steadied me the way his little hand used to when we crossed busy streets. I'm proud, Mom. Then Brianna. Can we talk later? A second later, a heart on my son's message, as if to stand next to him. Publicly polite even in private. I put the kettle on before I brewed coffee, because I wanted the sound of water working its way to heat. On the counter lay the HOA binder, open to the page about gatherings. 15 for the septic. Register large events at least 48 hours ahead. Quiet hours 10 to 7. No glass on the beach. Dogs on leash. I had thought of those lines as a neighborly lullaby when I first read them. This morning they were notes in a song I knew I would have to sing out loud. I made a list on a yellow legal pad, because that's what a teacher does when a classroom has gotten noisy. We make lists. We post them by the door, and we point to them gently and say, remember. The words had to be simple, not a lecture. House shoes in the basket by the door. Plastic only by the water. Quiet hours as posted. Ask before you move something that isn't yours. I added, call me first. It felt silly to make a rule for a phone call. But then again, the silliness had been in me thinking anyone could hear unspoken requests. The rain had washed the yard clean. The flamingo leaned against the rail, a pink joke I decided to keep for the kids. Not everything had to be improved by my taste. I opened all the windows again to let the pine and clean air through. I set oil beside the maple table and worked a little of it into the dark ring until the wood drank and sighed. Then I called Lois. It's Margaret, I said, and she knew which one, because on our east side of the lake, there are 3 Margarets and 2 Peggys, and a Marge anyone who knows me would never confuse me with. Her voice was brisk in the way that had soothed me at PTA meetings, when we had needed someone to say what needed saying. I meant to check on you, she said. You got a bit of weather. And a bit of a crowd, I added, and heard, even over the phone, the smile in the way she exhaled. She said, well, that happens. Then she paused. There have been emails. You know how it is. People like to note things officially. Don't fret. But if you want, there's a stack of laminated signs in the association hall about occupancy and noise and such. It's less personal if you want to set one out. Less personal. I had spent so long making everything personal, my casseroles, my time, my yes, that the idea of a sign felt like a relief. A rule, not a plea. I'll swing by, I said. Thank you. There was a letter in my mailbox when I walked out to my little road, the gravel soft with rain. Association envelope. It was a warning, kindly phrased, A neighbor reported a gathering over the recommended occupancy, reminders of fines, a request to attend the next meeting to discuss community expectations. It was all polite, and the feeling that went through me wasn't anger so much as hot-faced embarrassment, like I had been scolded in front of a class for talking. That childish heat was a good teacher. It told me just how much I'd learned to keep myself small until someone else made me visible, and how much that visibility felt like being in trouble. I folded the letter and tucked it inside the binder like a curriculum I intended to master. At 9, I answered Brianna's text. Later, I wrote back, "Yes, I'm going to the association hall to get signs and speak to them about what happened. There's a meeting Thursday night. I'd like you there if you can. 3 dots. Then, of course, we all want to be good neighbors. We all." The habit of folding me into language so it felt generous, and then using that word to pry instead of to embrace. I spooned out a second cup of coffee and told myself not to rehearse the arguments in my head. Rehearsal would make me brittle, and I wanted to be steady. The association hall is little more than a large room with a stained glass window donated by someone's grandmother years ago. It shows a loon with its neck extended, and the word Pine Dune curling above it in green glass script. There are long tables that always smell faintly of bake sale sugar and winter dust no matter the season. Lois was there with a box of folded signs that read, "Welcome to Pine Dune. Respect quiet hours. Register gatherings. Love the lake." She handed me 2 and slid a stack of flyers across. "Put these by your door. People forget, and then they haven't really forgotten, because they can't say you didn't tell them." She glanced at my binder and my legal pad and my "I've got this" face and seemed to consider something. "You know," she said, tapping the table. "We all have a story about the first summer. Everyone thinks the lake is just an extension of whatever they had in the city. It never is. The lake doesn't want a stage. It wants a shoreline." I told her about the years I had worked nights, about oiling the maple table. I don't know why. Maybe because she was older than me by 10 years and wore her visor like a little sail. She patted my forearm. "You don't have to justify your peace," she said. "Not to me, not to anyone." I took the signs and went home. On the way, I stopped for groceries. 2 bags of flour, butter, lemons. I have learned that if I write a thing down, I am more likely to follow it. And I had written, "Make a lemon cake." No particular reason, except that making something out of measured parts calms me. While the cake cooled, I taped the laminated sign to a little stake and pressed it into the sand by the path to the beach. Love the lake. Respect quiet hours. Register gatherings. There. The words stood even when I was inside, doing dishes, feeling something unclench in my chest each time I caught the sign's green at the corner of my eye. Just before noon, a delivery truck rumbled up my gravel. The driver hopped out, cheerful in the way that makes you like a person even before you understand what they are bringing. "Where would you like it?" he asked, as if I had been expecting this Christmas morning. "What is it?" I asked. He pointed at the long box with the dock shop printed on it in navy letters, and a smaller one scotch-taped to the top with a bow. "Custom signage," he said, hauling the smaller box out to show me the proof taped to the top. "Welcome to the Benson's Lake House," in a cursive that put splashes at the end of every stroke, like someone had been painting too fast. 2 little pine trees on either side of the word Benson's. My face went hot and cold at the same time. It wasn't anger first. It was the sudden drop in the gut that comes when you understand you have missed a step. I told the man kindly there had been a mistake. He showed me the order, placed by Brianna 2 days ago. Expedited shipping, install at dock entrance. "I'm sorry," I said, and took out my wallet because I couldn't bear the checkerboard of apology and embarrassment playing across my chest. "I can't accept this. Please return it." He hesitated. "There's a 20% restocking fee," he said, as if he were breaking bad news about the weather. "I'll pay it," I said. He shook his head and waved a hand. "No, ma'am. Let me see what I can do. It happens." He loaded the box back onto his truck and drove away with a beep that sounded like kindness. I stood in my quiet yard and felt that old, strong heat come back, cleaner this time. I called Brianna. She answered cheerfully. "Did you get it? It's a gift. My friend knows a guy who does them. It's just cute. We can hang it by the dock or on the porch. People will see it when they come up the path. It makes it feel welcoming." "The house is already welcoming," I said, "to people I invite, and my name is on the deed." There was a pause. "Well, Jason's name is on it now too," she said lightly. "Eventually." "Not yet," I said. "And this isn't about a name on a board. It's about the way you keep planting a flag where you haven't asked to set it." "Oh, Margaret," she said, and made my name into a sigh. "I thought you might loosen up after last night. It was just a rain call, a little mood swing." "Don't lock things down on a mood." It felt like being brushed aside with a feather duster, soft and belittling. "I am not a mood," I said, quiet. "I am the person who bought this house. The sign is being returned." She exhaled. "Okay," she said, voice crisp now. "Okay, noted." She reset herself, quicker than the traffic lights downtown. "Listen, I already sent a note to friends about Saturday. It's not 30, maybe 20. Work friends and cousins. We can do paper plates. Everyone brings a dish to pass. I'll register with the HOA if that makes you feel better. It'll be good to show them we're playing by the rules. The kids are so excited about being at the lake house. They've been drawing pictures." "No," I said. "No more events. Not right now. Not until we have a plan that respects the rules I'm putting in place. You can't cancel on people," she said. "It makes us look flaky." "We?" I asked. She didn't answer that. "I'm not canceling," I said. "I'm making the invitation you sent without asking me expire." She went quiet. Then, with the care she uses when she knows a sentence could break a glass if she drops it wrong, she said, "You're being unreasonable." And there it was. The word every woman past 60 has heard when she stops tidying, stops smoothing, stops being the basket for the things no one else wants to carry. "We are going to the association meeting Thursday," I said. "Please come. I want to speak to everyone, and I'd rather you hear it with the same ears they do than have me repeat myself afterward." She laughed once, not kindly. "A public scolding. Fun." "No," I said. "A public clarity." After we hung up, I did one more small thing that felt like a grip finding my palm. I took the main key off the ring I had kept in my pocket and threaded it onto a length of red ribbon I'd saved from a Christmas package the year Jason was 10. I slipped the ribbon over my head. It lay warm against my sternum, a little weight under my t-shirt, and when I breathed, I could feel it lift and lower, the way a life vest does when you're lying on your back in the lake and letting it hold you. The key was my symbol because it had always been what I handed over too readily. Access. To my time, to my pantry, to my patience. I took a piece of green dock line from the garage half-coil and put it in my tote. One to hold, one to release. I would tie the knot if I needed to remind myself where I came from. The texts started pouring in around 3. Friends of Brianna asking if they could bring a salad Saturday, if there was enough ice, if we had room for one more cooler. Acquaintances I had met once asking for the address. Strangers. "Hey, is the lake house available for a day rental this month?" I saw a post. One message from a woman I recognized as a friend of a friend. "We loved your place Saturday. Hope it's okay we tagged you." I clicked through, and there's Brianna's face lit in sunset color, arm extended, my dock behind her like a line of punctuation. "New house for the fam. Can't wait for all the weekends up here." I wrote nothing publicly. I wrote her, "Please remove any posts inviting people to the house." She hearted the message and wrote, "It's not an invitation. It's sharing joy. People are happy for us." The word "us" had a way of gathering people up, like a picnic blanket you shook open without telling them where to sit. Thursday came with a sky like milk, and that slow, warm wind that smells like cut grass and gas spilled from mowers. I put the lemon cake on a plate and covered it with a dish towel the way my mother did, and I carried my binder and the rope in my tote and the key against my chest to the association hall. I wore my quiet clothes, soft blue shirt, clean capris, shoes I could stand steadily in. The hall had row after row of chairs that look surprisingly stern when you line them up. "Don't slouch," they say without words. There were 3 coolers of water and iced tea, and a sign-in sheet and a pen with a fake flower taped to it so it wouldn't walk away. The president, Gary, who sits on his dock in a straw hat every morning and hums, stood at the front with a microphone that squealed when he tapped it. He waved us in, a teacher with a class too old to need waving and too used to getting it to go without. The first part of the meeting was always budget lines and culvert replacements, and someone's question about the goose deterrent trial they had promised last fall. I sat with my hands in my lap and felt the key, and when there was a motion to approve the minutes and a second, and all in favor aye, I found myself saying aye like an answer to a different question entirely. My voice sounded like it always had when I had introduced a lesson. Here we are. Welcome. Gary got to the part of the agenda labeled Community Conduct, and he lifted a paper with a list of reminders like a mom reading off chores. We love energy, he said, because he is kind, and also because he is the sort of man who believes if he says something is love, people will feel less scolded by it. But with summer upon us, we are noticing larger gatherings and a bit of forgetfulness about registration. Remember courtesy quiet hours, glass restrictions, occupancy. Lois, do you want to... I raised my hand. The red ribbon was a little flag when my elbow lifted. Gary, I said, standing because I taught my students manners, and when I ask for a room's attention, I give it back by being visible. I'd like to speak to that. He smiled and gestured with his palm, the microphone still in his hand, and when he saw me walk toward the front, he did a gracious and terrible thing and stepped aside. The mic bumped something and squealed loud enough that people flinched. Then it went quiet. 30 faces turned to me. It's funny the things your body remembers. Where to breathe when a room has the hum of anticipation. How to plant your feet. I looked out at the familiar and less familiar faces. Lois in her visor. The tidy bearded man whose name I didn't know. The woman from 2 roads over who sells honey and always looks like summer. In the back, my son slipped in and sat on the edge of a chair, his knee bouncing once, then stilling when he caught my eye. Beside him, Leighton Shore, Brianna slid into the seat, sunglasses on her head like a crown. It didn't start this afternoon, I said into the quiet, surprised at my own voice sounding like water on stones, steady and low. It didn't start when the speaker went quiet, and 30 faces turned to me like I was an interruption. It started before, with me saying yes to things I didn't have the courage to say no to. It started with me thinking I could buy a cottage and leave at the door the part of me that was taught to let other people decide what my house is for. A little shift in the chairs, polite discomfort at the personal being aired. I held up the binder. I love rules, I said, and a small laugh moved across the room because they had seen me with stars penciled at the margins at the last meeting. Not because I like to tell people what to do, but because I like to know where the edges are. Edges keep us from drifting so far we lose the shore. I felt the key. The ribbon warmed at my neck. I'm embarrassed to say I broke the rules this weekend, I said. I did. I let a gathering happen in my home that was too large. I thought I could manage it. I could not. I let bottles go on the beach because it felt easier to say yes than to be the person who says, "Give me that glass, please." I watched scratches get made that will fade. Yes, but won't vanish. I asked for help, and then I backed away from my own ask. People listened because confession makes us lean in, even when it isn't ours. A neighbor stopped by to remind me of the website for registering, I added, nodding to Lois, whose mouth softened into the line she keeps for kind and hard truths. She was right. I have since registered nothing because I am not hosting a gathering this Saturday, or next. Not until I have a way to do it that doesn't make me into a schoolmarm and my home into a hall. My daughter-in-law invited people to use my house as if it were a park shelter we all pitched in for. She is good at inviting. I am good at making the food and wiping off the counters and finding a clean towel. But I am 66 years old, and I am done being the second part without the first part asking me if I want to be. I wasn't going to look at Brianna, and then I did. Because courage means putting your eyes where your mouth is. She was watching me, face composed, hands folded so tight I could see the tendons. "Brianna," I said into the mic and into the room, "you are welcome in my home when I invite you. You are welcome with my grandchildren, who hung their swimsuits on my deck rail and ate popsicles with red mouths, and left me the kind of sticky that feels like love when I wash it off the next day. You are welcome for weekends that we plan together, with a head count that keeps the septic and the neighbors safe. You are not welcome to bring 30 people because you like the look of the sunset against my dock. You are not welcome to call it our lake house on the internet, like I am a dot in your exclamation point. You are not welcome to move my drawers or change my codes or order a sign with a name that isn't mine, that is not joy, that is erasure painted cheerful. A murmur. Someone cleared a throat. Gary shifted, and I could feel the room thinking about whether this had become something else. I smiled, because when a room goes ashamed, you can take it back by reminding everyone you know how to stand. This is what I am doing, I said, the list in my head like a gentle metronome. I have put up the association signs. The rules are posted at my door and in my kitchen. I have changed the garage codes and taken back 3 keys and left 1. A dock key, hanging on a hook by my door for when grandchildren want to fish, and I want to enjoy the sound of their silly arguments about who gets the blue life vest. I have written down how to be at my house so I don't have to say it 10 times and feel like the bad guy each time. I am asking the association to add to the reminders that family gatherings are also gatherings. We forget that. Joy is louder than rules. I will pay the fine for last weekend. I am not here to wriggle out of consequences. I took the rope from my tote, and the knot came back to my fingers like it had been sitting behind my knuckles all this time waiting for them to be brave. When I was a girl, I said, my father taught me to tie a knot that would hold a rowboat, 2 loops. The rope was green against my palms, and I made the first loop, snug and good. 1 to hold. I made the second loop, quick. The twist ready to give if you needed to pull away. 1 to release. He said, tie it so it holds or the boat runs away, but tie it so you can get free when the weather turns and you need to move. I have been tying one kind of loop my whole life. I know how to hold. This is me learning the release. Someone made a small sound like a sigh. Or maybe it was the old floor settling. I set the rope and the binder on the table. I lifted the key from my shirt so it lay on the outside, a little brass sun against blue. This opens my door, I said. I put it on a ribbon because I am not going to pretend access is casual anymore. If you want to come in, you ask. I'll answer. Sometimes I'll say no. That no is not a punishment. It's me tying the second loop so the boat doesn't slam and break. I looked at Gary. Thank you for the space, I said. That's all. He took the mic back like someone receiving a fragile thing, both hands, careful. He nodded once, and I could see gratitude in the way his mouth tightened. He's had to be the voice for too many people who won't stand and speak themselves. The room did a strange, kind thing. It didn't clap. It breathed. People shifted and exhaled and sat back as if the chairs had let them see a view they hadn't noticed. Then Lois, bless her, said, "Hear, hear," in her dry voice, and a few people chuckled, and the enormous held silence fell away. Brianna raised her hand then, and you have to admire that about her, how she will not be left out of a moment. Gary nodded, and she stood, posture perfect, trying not to let her face show everything it was holding. I love my family, she said, and it was true, and we could all hear it. I love my children in this room. She gestured at the unseen children of the lake. And I want them to have what I didn't. Places that feel like they belong to you. Spaces where you don't tiptoe. She looked at me. I didn't grow up with cottages. I grew up visiting other people's, and you always felt like you had to be perfect there. She breathed and squared her shoulders again. So when we finally had a place, and there it was again, the little slide of language, I got excited, I invited. I believed, honestly, Margaret, that this was what you wanted. People, joy. It looked lonely to me, the way you set the table for one. It was a sharp and soft truth at once. I had set the table for one and liked the echo of my fork on the plate. But I didn't want to be a lonely argument Brianna carried into rooms to prove her point. I want both, she said, and her voice broke on the word and then steadied. I want to be the house where people come, and I want to be the daughter-in-law who listens. I have not listened well, because when you say no to me, I think you're saying no to us. and I've spent a lot of years trying to get the world to say yes to me. I am good at grabbing. I am not good at asking. It was not the apology I would have chosen. But then again, you get the apologies people have the capacity for, not the ones you would write for them if you were handling their pen. "I will take down the post," she said to the room, and I watched Lois nod, satisfied with the public record. "I will register gatherings when we have them, with numbers that match what is written. I will be the person who buys more plastic cups, because I've been told no glass on the beach." A little ripple of laughter running under that. "And if you see me doing something wrong, you can speak to me. You can use my name. I'll hear it. I may still get it wrong, but I'll try." Afterward, with the lemon cake cut into tidy squares and set beside the coffee urn, people came up like they do in school hallways after you've talked. A woman I didn't know patted my arm and said, "Good for you." The tidy bearded man introduced himself as Corey, Lot 18, apologized for Cindy setting the crock pot on my table, said she felt terrible. "We'll sand that out," he said, and I felt the generous bridge in his voice. Gary told me the fine would stand but be reduced, said it was important to be consistent and important to be kind, and we had managed both. Lois said, "That not. Your father taught you well," and I smiled and told her it had held boats through storms. Brianna came close, and she had the look she wore in the hospital after she'd had their first baby, surprised at the shape of her life and determined not to show it. "You enjoyed that," she said, a little edge hidden in the softness. "Being the wise one on a microphone." "I enjoyed being clear," I said. "I don't mind if you think I looked wise. It's better than the alternative." She made a face. "I took down the posts," she said, and showed me her phone, the little squares of public life rearranged to remove my doc. "I'll message people about Saturday." "I already told people no," I said. "You'll be echoing me." She tucked her hair behind her ear. "I want to be good at this," she said, and the "this" was so big it took up half the room. Family. Not performing it. Doing it. I go fast. "I know." "You go fast," I said, "and you go with a train behind you. About half the cars aren't loaded. They're loud anyway." She laughed, and it came out her nose the way laughter does when it catches you just wrong and just right. "Come up Sunday," I said, surprising us both. "Just you and the kids. Jason if he isn't on call. I'll make sandwiches. There are rules on the fridge. You can read them and roll your eyes in private. I'll bring plastic cups," she said, "and I'll take off my shoes." "Thank you," I said, "because when you want a habit to grow, you water it." On the drive home, the late afternoon light threw kind gold beneath the oaks. At the cottage, the sign on the path looked handsome and official. I put the rope back in the garage, coiled neatly. I took the key off my neck and hung it on the little hook I had remounted by the door. The click it made when it settled felt like a song I didn't know I loved. I wrote the house rules on a sheet of paper in my neat teacher print and slid it under a magnet shaped like a cherry because I buy one cherry thing every summer in a nod to Traverse City and the way road stands look in July with boxes of jewel-toned fruit. Shoes off inside. Plastic only on the beach. Quiet hours 10 to 7. Ask before you move something that belongs to someone else. Call me first. When I woke the next morning, it was to the soft knock of morning waves and the loon calling somewhere like a farm musician tuning a new instrument. I brewed coffee and took it out to the steps. A neighbor waved from a pontoon. Corey, maybe. And I waved back. A text chimed. "Jason. Thank you. Brianna. I'm bringing a book Sunday. Do you have a life vest in a smaller size now that Beck has outgrown the orange one?" I wrote back, "Yes." I ordered 2. I watched a boy down the shore practice skipping stones and manage 4 hops and throw his arms up like his little body had figured out physics on its own. The air smelled like pine and yesterday's lemon, faint and sweet. I do not think I will stop wanting to say yes. My body knows how. It is muscle memory. But now when my mouth opens, my hand will find the ribbon and the key, or at least the place it lay. Now when someone arrives with a train of their intentions, I will ask what's in the cars. I will uncouple the ones I can carry. I will send the others down another track. That is not unkindness. That is an honest map. My father would be proud of the knot. He would tell me he knew I'd find the other loop eventually. He'd see me rub oil into the table and say, "You can lighten a mark. Sometimes you learn to live around it." He'd sit with me on the steps and show me how the water tells you the weather before your bones do. And I'd tell him my bones tell me too, now. And I listened. Sunday came, and the kids spilled out like birds. Brianna held up her bare feet at the door in a pantomime of compliance, and we laughed together, not loudly, not sharp. Jason set the cooler on the deck and didn't need me to show him where the cups went. They were labeled now, a little basket right where you'd expect it. We made sandwiches and ate them on the picnic table under a sky that was soft and faithful. When the children asked if they could use the flamingo, I said yes, and they hauled it down, giggling. There were grass stains and wet hair and a red popsicle that fell, plop, onto the deck, and a child's voice saying, "Sorry," and my voice saying, "It's all right," without lying, without swallowing something I'd need to let out later. It was all right, because we had tied our knots. Later, when the kids were dry and sticky-cheeked and drowsy from all that good air, I took a little tin from a drawer. Inside was one of my father's old lures, a silver spoon with a red slash on the end. I handed it to Brianna. "For your key ring," I said, and she looked puzzled until she saw I was smiling, and then she smiled too. "One loop to hold, one to release," I said. "I can show you again if you forget." She turned the lure over in her fingers. "Careful." "Teach me now," she said. I cut a piece off the coil of dock line, and we sat on the steps, while the kids made up rules for a game that changed whenever one of them lost. And I taught her with my father's words in my mouth and my own voice, both. The lake reached and pulled back and reached again, and for the first time in a long time, I felt the particular peace that isn't empty at all. It was a pattern. It was a plan. It was a life I could rest inside and still be seen, not as part of someone else's proclamation, but as myself. When the afternoon tilted toward evening, when the shadows got long on the path, I hung my key back on its hook. The click was enough. The door stayed closed until I opened it. The house breathed like a thing relieved, and so did I, and so did I. The days after that meeting felt like the afternoon after a storm when the sky keeps checking in to make sure you're all right. People who had been brisk with their phones and busy on their porches were suddenly slower, offering me hellos that lingered for a beat longer than before. The social media thread that had felt like a runaway train when Brianna first posted quieted down. She had taken the pictures down and sent personal messages instead, the way people used to before everything wanted to be a proclamation. One by one, the invitations that had poured in, coolers, casseroles, confetti of plans, dried up into the sensible requests I'd always meant to have. Could Becky and Tom come for Sunday? Is there room for my brother-in-law for the weekend? May we bring just our small group of 4? There was a practical edge to those quieter days. Corey from Lot 18 stopped by with a little jar of wood putty and a sander on his shoulder. "Cindy insists," he said, and he laughed like apologizing made him feel less like a messenger and more like a neighbor. He sanded out the worst of the ring on the maple and left the jar on my counter with a hand-lettered note. "For when you have company, Corey." Small acts like that built a bridge between the meeting room clarity and the lived reality of the dock and the dishes. A neighbor I'd never met before brought over a stack of plastic cups and paper plates stamped with cheerful sailboats and said, "Thought this might help," like she was handing me a tiny tool to help hold my peace. The association took the matter more seriously than I had expected in an interestingly kind way. Gary, always the one to talk in the voice of compromise, led a subcommittee to update the website with clearer definitions: family and guests, small private gatherings versus events that required registration, and a consolidated FAQ about septic capacity, parking etiquette, and quiet hours enforcement. There were emails, yes, and some bureaucratic papers, but mostly there was a new clarity posted under the same stained glass loon that looked a little prouder now that we had said aloud what we needed from one another. The fine was reduced. Conditional, Gary said, with a kind of firmness that didn't try to erase what happened, but did try to turn it into a lesson we all could carry. It was less about punishment and more about being consistent. I paid it without making a face because the price of visibility, I'd learned, is not only in the cash drawer, but in the way your boundaries are tested and then respected. Brianna surprised me in ways that warmed and sometimes stung in the best possible way. She kept showing up, sometimes with Jason, sometimes with the kids, sometimes on her own to sit on the dock and read something light while the world made its ordinary noises. She worked on her timing. She texted to ask the correct question. Would this weekend be okay for just family? Or, is this something you want us to handle, or would you like to plan it together? She learned that inviting could be a team sport, and that there is as much grace in agreeing to boundaries as there is in asking for them. The first time she returned a key to me with a ribbon tied around it, I thought my heart would float away. She didn't slide it across the table like a surrendered weapon. She put it in my palm and said, "It feels right this way." And the ribbon was a smaller one than mine. The red had faded, but it was earnest, and my fingers remembered the heft of letting go and the comfort of holding. We both laughed, a soft, private thing, as if we'd reached some shore together. She'd kept the little silver lure on her ring, the one I'd handed her, and now she had a tiny brass key joined to it. "So I remember," she said, and for the first time I believed she would. We made other practical agreements that read like the choreography of grown-ups learning to dance together. Jason and I went through a calendar for the summer and penciled in days that were for family only and days that were for us, quiet and private. He learned, in the kind way sons do, to leave the coolers where he'd been told, rather than where he thought they should be. He started answering my calls first, before he forwarded them to someone else. He stood beside me at the garage when I changed the codes and helped me test the new deadbolt, his hand on the tool next to mine. He was steady in a way that felt like coming home in a different season. The children, oh the children, were fast to forgive the world its crossings. They slid into the lake with reckless expertise, encouraged by a grandparent's permission that came with rules tucked neatly into the margin. Life vests on unless we're within arm's reach. No glass on the beach. Sandals off inside. They learned a small household liturgy. Knock before the linen closet. Ask before borrowing a towel. They were delighted to practice tying the knot we had agreed on. One loop to hold, one to release. And they made it into a game where the winner was the child with the neatest loop. We taped a diagram onto the inside of the utility closet door, the way I used to tape multiplication tables near my classroom desk. The rules felt less like constraints than like a language we could all use to keep from talking past one another. There were small moments of friction, of course. Someone left an unregistered cooler on the path one Saturday, and a neighbor left a note on the handle, polite but unmistakable, and it was a small test of our newfound civility. Brianna apologized, personally and publicly, and offered to drive the contents to a nearby shelter that afternoon. That gesture landed in the neighborhood the way a bell chimes in a small town. People heard it and felt better for it. We were, collectively, practicing the art of repair. My own quiet, the kind that is not emptiness, but the comfortable hush of a life ordered with intention, grew. I found myself saying no in small, honest ways that surprised me. No to a midweek drop-in that came with an entourage. No to a request to store someone's kayak, because the garage needed to be kept for our bikes. Those no's did not come with the shame that used to coat them. Instead, they were steady as the key on my hook. A clear, friendly mechanism for entry and exit. I would still say yes when it suited my heart. Yes to an impromptu cup of tea with Lois on the porch. Yes to a neighbor needing to borrow a bowl for a potluck. But those yeses now matched my will. At night, after everyone had left the dock for their own homes, and the children had been tucked in with stories about the loon, I'd sit on the steps and oil the table if it needed it, or just run my palm over the places where life had left a mark. The oil drew out the grain, and the maple seemed to take a breath. The scar on the deck from the party that had tipped into too many people did not disappear. It softened. It looked like a place we had been together, not a wound to be hidden. My father's voice lived in the house like a small, sensible lighthouse. "Tie it so it holds," he had said. "Tie it so you can get free when the weather turns." I had done both. I had held and released in ways that felt true. Summer rolled on with its warm, steady rhythm. My lemon cake recipe acquired a new apprentice, Brianna, who insisted on measuring and stirring under my supervision. She learned to fold the batter the way my hands knew, and to test for doneness with the same delicate press that used to tell me when a batch was right. We laughed when the cake stuck a little to the tin and settled for imperfect pieces, the way some relationships settle, not with perfect edges, but with plenty of flavor. Once, after a long afternoon of kids chasing dragonflies and Jason stripping the dock of a loose board, two of the couples who'd been most vocal at the meeting came over with a cooler of iced tea and a plate of lemon bars. "For the teacher who taught us all how to behave," one of them said, and we all laughed. Teachers are rarely thanked quite like that. They sat on our porch until the sky turned the color of peat and gold, and we traded small stories about our fathers, about the dog who chased geese, about the first time any of us had been brave enough to say a hard thing out loud. In the months that followed, the key became less of a fetish and more of a promise. I kept mine on the hook by the door and took it down when I wanted to leave. Brianna kept her little lure and brass key on her ring, and sometimes left it with me for a night when she knew she'd be late. Once she accidentally left the key on my counter when she stayed overnight during a thunderstorm and the kids were clinging to her like vines. I found the key, looped her ribbon through it, and slipped it into my pocket. The next morning she arrived with a pot of coffee and a sheepish grin. She didn't demand unearned privileges after that. She asked, and I said yes or no, and sometimes yes with coffee and donuts. We built trust the way slow cooks build flavor, patient heat and constant attention. I learned to be kinder to myself in the margins. I let the small embarrassments, like the association letter folded into my binder, be what they were: lessons. I started to teach a small woodshop class on Saturday mornings at the hall, a community thing that Corey had suggested after he'd smoothed my table. We made birdhouses and fixed old chairs, and people brought their tips and their bad jokes and left with something they'd made. It was a way to gather without the pressures of perfection that had haunted me before. At the end of each session, we'd stand the birdhouses on the table like little confessing churches, colors bright in the sun, and someone would always say, "Look at that. Isn't that something?" And it was. One evening, much later that season, after the buoys had been set and the lake had started fragrant with the tang of approaching fall, Brianna and I sat on the dock and tied knots. She was working on a new loop for her boat, and I watched her fingers make the turns my father had taught me. The children were inside, arguing about whether bedtime stories should be short or long, and the porch light painted the water gull wing silver. I handed her a length of dock line and watched her eyes narrow in concentration, and then soften as her hands remembered what mine had remembered years before. "You taught me to ask," she said, like a confession and an offering all at once. "And you taught me to listen when you said yes. I don't want to be someone who takes the shore because I like how it looks in pictures." We smiled. "One to hold," I said, and she looped the line. "One to release," she finished, both of us saying the parts and finding ourselves in the sentence. We were not the same people who had first faced each other across a cluttered yard. We were two women who had learned that houses are not just spaces, but agreements made with neighbors and with ourselves. When I hung the key back on its hook that night, the metal caught the porch light and threw a line of gold across the floorboards. I paused for a long time with my hand on it, feeling both the weight and the ease. It had been a talisman for me, yes, but it had become something more. A small, honest ledger of who could enter and what they would find when they did. If you take anything from how the summer settled here on Pine Dune, let it be this. Keeping your boundaries doesn't mean closing the door to joy. It means making a door worth opening. It means learning not only to hold what you love, but also to let go, when letting go is the kinder thing to do. My house is full now. Not of strangers, but of the right company. It's full of laughter that knows the time to quiet, of sand that gets swept away into the grass rather than into the kitchen sink, of keys hung and sometimes shared with care. There are still days when I want to say yes to everything, when old muscles that were built on saying yes creak and plead. But now, when that old reflex starts, my hand finds the ribbon and the key, and my breath finds the seam of the knot. The freedom is not in never being asked. It is in knowing who I am when I answer. I am Margaret. I am 66, and I have a map of my own shore. I am as open as I choose to be, and as firm as I need to be. That is not a contradiction. It is a way of being kind to myself and to others. If this small story landed with you, tell me. What knot would you tie to hold the things you love? Leave a comment, give a like if it warmed you, and subscribe so we can gather again. I have a lemon cake recipe to share and a few more knots to teach. Remember, you can make room for joy without losing yourself, because a well-tied knot keeps the boat safe and the harbor yours.